Good afternoon, and welcome to another Guitar Solutions Detroit video. Now, this has been sort of a big week in guitar news, and so rather than doing another pedal demo, rather than singing another song-ish, or playing my guitar for you, I thought that I would take some time to share my thoughts about some of what's going on this week. Now, for those of you who aren't aware, David Gilmour's black Stratocaster sold for over $3 million at Christie's auction house this week, setting a new record for the most expensive guitar ever sold at auction. In other news, Gibson has truly jumped the shark in terms of everything. Well, maybe not everything, but so for those of you who don't know, Gibson had filed a motion to sue for trademark infringement a number of other large guitar manufacturers, which explains the meme at the beginning of the video. And this is just, in my opinion, another in a long line of bad decisions by Gibson. But ultimately, what I really want to talk about today is the age-old debate of Fender versus Gibson. Now, for those of you who watch the channel, for those of you who are familiar with my work, you'll know exactly where I come down in the Fender versus Gibson debate in terms of the instruments that I prefer to play. But what I want to talk about today is not so much preference. What I want to talk about today in terms of Fender versus Gibson are the things that we can quantify. Items that we can put a number to, we can measure objectively and kind of compare these two brands. Now, Fender has really been sticking it to Gibson for a while now in terms of sales. And there are some reasons for this. One of the biggest reasons for this is that over about the last decade or so, Fender as a company has kind of been expanding their product line. And when I say that they're expanding their product line, I don't mean that they're, introducing new body types or anything radical like that, although, they have been kind of cycling through some of the other classic body types other than just the Stratocaster, the Telecaster, the Jazz Bass, and the P Bass. Throughout the last decade or so, we've seen Jaguars, we've seen Mustangs, maybe a Cyclone or two, but there certainly have been one or two standout exceptions of new products that Fender has put out. They've put out some pedals in the last couple of years, and some of those pedals, from all the reviews that I've seen anyway, have been pretty great. I haven't played any of them yet, but more importantly, I think where Fender is winning the battle is price point. And what I mean by that is that when you walk into Guitar Center, when you walk into your local music store, if they have a good selection of the Fender range, you'll be able to walk out of the store with a guitar, almost within reason, no matter how much money you walk in with. So if I walk into a Guitar Center, I just use that example because I don't live in Fort Wayne. Sorry, Sweetwater. to buy a guitar, and let's say I have $700, just nice middle of the road figure, $700. I will, in terms of Fender guitars, I'm going to have some choice. I'm going to have some selection. I could get a Telecaster, a Stratocaster. I think that some of the newer Jaguars that they've been making in Mexico come in around that price point. And Fender has been introducing all of these different lines. They have different lines within the Mexican range. They have different lines within the American range. And so pretty much you can walk in with anywhere between, about $500 and $2,000 and be happy. Like walk out with a guitar that you're happy with purchasing, that you feel good about. And Gibson doesn't really have this. And yes, you can get like a Squier guitar for less than $500, and Fender has been improving that product line. So there are some good products in the Squier range that you can get even for a little bit more than like the $100 to $150 starter guitar price point. That will be under kind of that $500-ish dollar mark for the Mexican vendors to get a guitar with the Fender brand on it. You can get a Squier Classic Vibe series. You can get a Squier Affinity series. And for the money, those guitars really aren't bad. There's nothing wrong with spending $250 to $450 on one of the nicer Squiers. They're not the same quality as a Mexican Fender. That's okay. They're not what they were 20 years ago either. They're better. Fender's been upping their game in terms of giving their customers better value for money. That's something that we can quantify. We can look at the woods that they're using. We can look at the parts that they're putting on these guitars, things like tuning machines, bridges, etc. And we can say, yep, these guitars have gotten better over the last 20 years. And again, we can look all through the Mexican range, through the American range, the various different grades of the American range, and say, yes, this is good value for money. These are they're using quality parts. With Gibson, over the last decade, we can't really say the same thing. For a while, Gibson was charging, kind of the same money they've always charged for the American Gibsons, and we'll get to Epiphone soon. But for the American Gibsons, they've been charging kind of the same money they've always been charging for those guitars. But in 2010, we started seeing some Gibsons, American Gibsons that had, Chinese tuning machines on them. We started seeing some Gibsons that they were making that instead of having the hand-wired pots, they were printed circuit board pots that were just kind of soldered in place. People didn't like them. People stopped buying them. And it took a lot of years for Gibson to stop doing that and go back to what they were doing before. And so that now, now you're getting more of what you would expect in terms of quality out of an American Gibson than you were getting previously. But again, that's why Fender has been killing them in terms of sales, or one of the reasons, because, again, I can't walk into a Guitar Center with $700 and walk out the door with a Gibson. I can get an Epiphone, and some of those Epiphone guitars in like the $500 to $800 range aren't bad instruments. They're not. In terms of, again, the parts used, the woods used, the electronics, even in a lot of cases, what you would call the fit and finish, did they account for fret sprout? Or how much of the fret sprout did they deal with before the guitar got to the end user? Because even on some of the Mexican Fenders, you still get a little bit of fret sprout, but they're getting better at that. And when you look at those Epiphones, you say, okay, well, yes, in terms of quality, these are as good or almost as good as the Mexican Fenders. Or they're as good as, they're near enough as good as makes no difference. But I have two problems as a consumer with the Epiphone guitars. One, they're not Gibsons. Like, they're not branded as Gibsons. And in my mind, there's no good reason that some of the higher end Epiphones shouldn't be. I know that that's a Gibson policy. I know that they want to keep that distinction for whatever reason between their US made and their non-US made instruments. The second problem that I have with the Epiphone guitars is that, in my opinion, because Gibson also has this policy where, they want an Epiphone Les Paul to look different from a Gibson Les Paul, and I'm not talking in terms of the body shape or the body carve or any of that. I'm talking about the hardware that they put on it. The headstock is different. That's not a big secret that the headstock is different on the Epiphone guitars. I'm kind of indifferent about the headstock, but like the tuning machines and some of the other parts that go onto those Epiphones, they look different. I don't like it. I don't think they look as nice as the Gibsons. And, I understand you're talking about an $800 guitar versus a $3,000 guitar. But Gibson, why? Why not just Fender does it. Why not just use the same hardware? Okay, change the headstock, fine. Make the headstock look a little different. Yep, I can see that's an Epiphone. But again, why aren't you branding these as Gibsons? I don't understand. Why does the distinction, when you reach a certain level of quality, whether it's made in the US or whether it's made somewhere else, why do we have to make that distinction between the Epiphone and the Gibson? If it's a quality instrument, why don't you want your name on it? Again, understanding that Epiphone is a Gibson brand, it's owned by Gibson, but why Gibson? Why? And I think that attachment that people have to the name, right? It's like, well, but it's not a Gibson. Like, I know it's made by Gibson, but it's not. Here I have a Fender, right? Sure, it's a Mexican-made Fender versus an American-made Fender, but it still says Fender on it. And so I think that for some consumers, I think that might be a bit of a hang-up. Also, too, Gibson, I'm sorry, the pricing on your American guitars is ridiculous. It just is. I know that, set neck guitars are a little bit more expensive to make than guitars with a bolt-on neck, and that, yes, there's a little bit more woodworking that goes into a more arch-top guitar like a Les Paul, because a Les Paul's not flat across the top, versus a Stratocaster or a Telecaster, which is flat across the top, right? I get that. There's a little bit more woodworking that goes into that. You tend to do like a laminate on mahogany, but is a $3,500 Gibson Les Paul Standard $2,000 nicer than a $1,500 Fender American Stratocaster? I don't think so. I don't think it's $2,000 nicer. There are absolutely some differences in the materials used. There are absolutely some differences in the labor that would have to go into producing the Les Pauls the way that Gibson produces them. I get that. And, I'm sure that the folks at Gibson have those numbers. They know what those numbers are. I don't know offhand what those numbers are. I just know that it's a different process. I know that it's a little bit more labor intensive. I don't think it's $2,000 more labor intensive. And ultimately, I'm more apt to buy like a really high-end Epiphone if I really wanted a Les Paul, or to get a Gibson standard, stay on the used market, than I would be to go buy a new Gibson Les Paul standard right off the shelf. Until Gibson does something about what, again, I think is an utterly ridiculous price point for those standards. And I know that they have some lower priced models that are in terms of price point more in line with what you'd see from a high-end American-made Fender. But I think Gibson, if anyone's listening, listen to me. Sit down, have a look, figure out where you can trim some of the fat off of that price, because I'm sorry, like I don't think your standard series Gibsons are worth $3,500+ I don't. And maybe someone at Gibson wants to reach out to me and sit down and show me why I'm wrong. I'm willing to listen. But I don't. Yes, they're nice guitars. Absolutely. Should they cost more than probably an American Fender because of the way that they're constructed? Yes. I just don't think it's $2,000+ more. I mean, I can understand that kind of a price point for a custom shop style guitar, okay, or even like a signature series, or like something that is above and beyond just your bog standard Les Paul. I mean, made in America, obviously, but I think that price point is more on line with some of the lower end custom shop stuff, because I know that even Fender custom shop stuff gets pricey. You get custom shop runs for various music shops that get into the $5,000 to $7,000 range. I get that, okay, but I don't think. I think Gibson's pricing might be a little bit ridiculous. But like I said, if someone can reach out to me, show me why I'm wrong, show me the numbers, put it on paper, explain it to me, I'm willing to listen. And I'm willing to eat my hat. I've got barbecue sauce in the fridge. Let's do this. But anyway, that's just sort of my take on the whole Gibson versus Fender thing. Gibson, good luck with the Me More. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Don't forget to click on the bell for notifications. I've been James, and this has been Guitar Solutions Detroit.